Anybody who's missing, you'll hear everything, but if you have questions, uh, phone number is going to be at the end, and then a little QR code for you guys to request a kind of a sample, an intro kit from Sashco, and we will, of course, reach out to you and answer any and all of your questions because we like doing that. So let me share my screen. There we go. And if you can't see for whatever reason, go ahead and put stuff in the chat. There's on the control bar, you should have the chat button there and just let me know. It should pop up and I'll be able to see if for some reason you guys aren't able to see my screen. But I want to thank ILBA for having me here today. I'm really just going to go through some stuff that some of you probably already know, and maybe haven't, put all of the information together. Some you guys build with logs all the time. And so you know how they act when you're building and what you need to account for with settling and shrinking. And I just want to share a little bit today about how, because of that settling and shrinking and movement, the products that are used on log homes need to be different. So I'm just going to go through some basics with you. And then, like I said, whatever questions you have, throw them in the chat. We'll have time at the end for a Q&A time. And I'll make sure to answer all your questions. And you'll also have a phone number for me at the end so you can reach out. So we're going to cover why logs ain't wood. I know that sounds silly, but you guys build with it. So logs are not like a 2x4. We'll go through the 5 prerequisites for log and wood home finishing, some stain application tips that are specific to log and wood homes, stain technology 101, and then have time for Q&A. So I'm just gonna jump in. Why logs ain't wood? They are not like everything else. There are just so many different things, so many things that make logs very unique. Being round, they have really great thermal mass. They hold heat and cold very well, making them very energy efficient when well constructed. The geometry of logs is obviously different from a 2x4. They see extreme temperatures, extreme water exposure too often. They get checks. The insects and fungi love to eat on natural products, and wood is one of them. And then, of course, sealants that you would normally put around windows and other, trying to seal the building envelope. Well, the building envelope on a log home is a little bit more extreme than on conventional construction. So we're going to go through that. In case you didn't know, the average log home has a mile worth of sealants. Now, on a handcrafted log home, that's less. A well designed and well built handcrafted log home, you won't have quite a mile of sealants. But there's a lot of caulking that is used on a log home. That really makes it different. Logs really take the heat. They, relative to conventional lumber and siding, when you see the angle that the sun can hit the log on this upper curve, especially, it gets burnt very quickly and very easily and at a very different rate than on the lower curve of the log, which creates some added stressors. On siding, you're getting that sun to hit and then it reflects straight off. So it can really cause a lot of issues with logs. They get really hot. And here's just an example. This is a thermographic image that we took on a home up in Wyoming. We did the temperatures in the same exact place in mid-afternoon in August when the temperature was 93 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about, 40 Celsius. And in December, when the air temperature was 42, which is about 4 Celsius. And you can see how hot things get, especially on that upper curve. In December, that upper curve can get up to 143 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, about 100, or not 100, sorry, 50, 55 Celsius. It's really hot, even in December when things are really cold. And that stresses all of the products used on a log home. The other thing, logs check. We all know this. Logs need to check. They have to have a pressure release at some point in time in their life. But of course, a check in a log is much more extreme than a check in a 2x4 that they're really trying to prevent completely. Plus, there's a whole lot of shrinkage that goes on with logs. And in three different planes, there's a lot of shrinking. So you have the tangential, the radial, and the longitudinal shrinking of a log. So you're having to account not just for it getting smaller and then bigger again as changes in humidity take place and temperature and that kind of thing, but it's also getting a tad bit shorter sometimes. Those pores are opening up and creating more movement. As the equilibrium moisture content changes, that log changes, and it's going to continue to do that throughout its life. Even when you have really good sealants on there and a really good coating, moisture is still going to want to move the capillary action on logs in the wood fibers themselves. You're always going to have some taking on and giving up of moisture, and you have to account for that with whatever you put on those logs because they're going to be constantly moving. They're in constant dynamic motion. Here are those three planes of movement. So you have your tangential here. You have your radial going in and out. That's when we sometimes can see twisting, and that's a sign that that's not a super great log. And then your longitudinal, of course, across the front plane of the log. Lots of movement going on with a log. You have a variety of different checks. You have some of these little mini surface checks, and then you have some of the deeper ones, all of which allow a different amount of moisture in and stress the products used a little bit differently, and all that need to be treated differently so that you're actually making sure to limit moisture and insects getting in there while allowing the logs to still move because they need to do that to allow for that pressure release. Um, so all of that, the upper curve of the logs, taking the full force of the sun, all those checks allowing water and critters and everything else, and just the sheer size and mass of logs that allows them to move more. It stresses all of the applied materials more. So all of this underscores the need for specialty made for logs, coatings, and sealants on log homes. What you're going to get at the home store is generally not going to be sufficient for a log, and I'll explain some more of that later. So now we know that logs ain't wood. We need to talk about combating all of that negative energy. And so these are the 5 prerequisites for finishing a log home. Hang on, I'm going to plug into my screen here. Todd joined me in the room. Say hi, Todd.
Sorry I'm late, everybody. It's Tardy Todd.
Tardy Todd. That's what we said. So these are the 5 prerequisites that any log home needs to have in place in order for the coatings, the sealants, anything that's applied on top to have a good chance of being very durable. So those 5 factors are sound wood, clean wood, textured wood, dry wood, and warm, not hot wood. I'm just going to go into all of these here. Sound wood. This means getting rid of all of the UV, water damaged, loose wood fibers prior to staying and applying a sealant. This applies to both restoration work and new construction. And I know that there are some who will say, I just need to do a quick power wash on new construction. Well, I'm going to show you a slide in a second that's going to show to you why that's not true. And sound wood is the most often overlooked and poorly understood or misinterpreted piece of those 5 prerequisites. It's usually done poorly and or insufficiently by the novice, and something that it's just easy to overlook because the blonde wood that looks blonde to us on the outside isn't always necessarily in the best shape. And so looks can be deceiving, is what I always have to tell people. So we took a log. This is an 8-inch Doug fir log, and we stuck it out in our backyard here at Sashco. We're in Denver, Colorado, so about 5,200 feet elevation. We're pretty high. We get about 30% more UV than anywhere else. Uh, and it really wreaks havoc on natural products. So we covered the right side with some just some metal sheeting and left the other side fully exposed facing south. And you can see in just 1 month a a pretty significant shift in that wood. And then after 6 months, you see quite a bit of darkening, especially on that upper curve again. 12 months, it has turned gray, and you'll even see this stuff over here. That's turned darker yellow. That's from oxidization. Oxygen alone will start to degrade the wood fibers and the lignin that holds the wood fibers together. Lignin is the glue that holds wood fibers together. Oxygen alone will do that. UV speeds up the oxygenation, the oxidization process. Women know this because we're always looking to reduce our age, and so we slather all kinds of creams that say they're antioxidants on our skin. Logs want the same thing. In 15 months, look at how gray that wood is. And you can see again over here on this side where it's gotten quite a bit yellower on that right side. All of that is going to severely degrade anything that you put over top. All those yellow wood fibers, all those gray wood fibers are eventually going to fall off the log, and anything you put over top is going to come right with it. And so it's very important that the surface that everything is sticking to is in very good shape before you start doing anything. Now, I did want to tell you about the pre-stained base coats because a lot of you are building with logs and then they're sitting out in a log yard for several months, waiting to go to the job site. And it is a good idea to use a pre-stain base coat. Color Fast is our product. There are other ones out there. They contain UV inhibitors. Oftentimes they have lignin stabilizers. They're great keeper coats that will reduce organic growth in and on the log while they're in the log yard and on or at the construction site. It'll reduce yellowing and color shifts. It won't stop it altogether, but it'll reduce it. And it also slows down evaporation. So the big checking that wants to take place, you're slowing down how quickly the moisture comes out to cause that checking. And so these pre-stained base coats are a really good idea as a keeper coat in the log yard. While during construction, when you're done fitting that log and it gets set aside, it really is very simple. Slap on a coat of Color Fast and move on and help reduce uh, some of that growth that can happen. I'm sure you guys have seen it. If you're covering everything up with tarps or something like that, sometimes you'll start to see algae or mildew growth on there. I think ours is the only product that I know of that contains an algicide and a mildew side, but it's a good idea to, okay, you're going to, prevent the discoloration under the tarp, but you can't reduce all of the growth from sometimes moisture getting trapped under there. So Color Fast is going to help with that as well. On restoration jobs, if you're doing a refinishing for someone or doing some log replacement for them, and you want to try to match the new wood with the old, Color Fast helps to create a more even canvas that can reduce blotchiness and overly dark stain once they get around to applying the stain. So these pre-stain base coats come in really handy when you're trying to reduce some of that damage that can happen if you otherwise just leave the wood bare. So I won't go into all of the different types of wood prep. We're fans of dry prep to remove all of that unsound wood. Glass media blasting, power washing can be done well, hand sanding. Sometimes chemical strips are required if you're removing a previous coating. There are lots of ways to get to where you need to go. It's just important that everything gets off. And if you have questions on the pros and cons of those, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to talk you through those. This is just a great picture of the results of media blasting on a job in Big Sky, Montana. As you can see, that home just had a whole lot of damage from it was like an oil-based stain and then sun. And they were able to get it back down to bare wood and have a nice, clean, sound surface to apply things to. So the next one, so we have sound wood. Next one is clean wood. Sometimes cleaners are absolutely necessary and should be used. They are the only thing that will kill mold and mildew and algae that's on the surface. What I'll tell you about, no matter what cleaner you use, there's lots of types out there. Oxalic acid, oxygenated bleach, plain old chlorine bleach. Always test to see which cleaner is most appropriate. You don't want it to discolor anything. And always rinse or power wash thoroughly after a cleaner to thoroughly neutralize it. Otherwise, you could end up with discoloration and it could actually continue to eat at the wood fibers, and all of that work that you've just done to remove the unsound wood fibers, you've just added back on by using a cleaner that hasn't been neutralized. So whenever you're using cleaners, you always want to thoroughly neutralize. There are some that you can use on the interior that don't require as much rinsing, but you do have to be very careful to test those first to make sure they don't discolor anything. Next one, textured wood. This sounds silly. On the interior, feel free to have your baby butt smooth wood. It looks nice and pretty and shiny and it's easy to clean. But on the exterior, texture is the name of the game. The more texture there is, the more surface area there is. The more surface area, the more stain you get on the wood. The more stain you get on the wood, the more protection you have. Plus, texture really helps to prevent the loss of stain adhesion when you're using a surface stain. So texture is a must-have. The process of media blasting or sanding usually does that. Power washing usually does it. You don't want to go smoother than a 60 or 80 grit on the exterior of a log home. And this is really what it looks like. You can see that extra surface there on the top. It can hold up to twice the amount of stain. When you have a textured surface, it creates all those micro surfaces that the stain then goes down into. Very helpful for stain durability. Some homeowners, they don't like that look. And so we tell them, hey, you want to go smoother, go ahead, but you're going to have to be doing more frequent maintenance. And so really up to you how if they got the money and they want to restain every few years, sure, go ahead. The next factor, this is number 4, dry wood. This means before putting on coatings, this is not for building. Building with green woods is a completely legitimate way to build. I know a lot of handcrafters who really prefer building with green logs, but before you're putting coatings on, it's best to get things down to a lower moisture content. Now, when you're using the Color Fast or the pre-stain base coats, this isn't a must-have. Those are pretty breathable, and there are stains out there that are pretty breathable, but at the end of the day, it's better to have the wood close to its moisture equilibrium before you start doing finishing, so that you're not stressing the coatings that are applied with an excess amount of osmotic pressure from all of that moisture evaporating out and wanting to come through the coating. So getting it to the moisture content is best. Coastal Alaska or BC, Victoria, BC, 19% is going to be about as low as you ever get. If you go down to the Southwest United States and Arizona, 6% is going to be what's comfortable for those logs. So get things as close as possible. If you're doing a refinishing job and doing power washing, I always tell people take your moisture meter out, take a measurement before you start, and you want to be back to that level before you start staining. And depending on your humidity and your temperature, that might be here in Colorado a day. And in Southeast United States, where it's super humid, it might be a week. So make sure that wood is really dry to the moisture equilibrium. And then finally, the last prerequisite, warm wood. Log surface temperature is really the key here, not the air temperature. So just because it says it's 60 degrees outside, once that sun hits that upper curve, we saw that in December temperatures where it was, 4 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees, it was getting up to be 140. So surface temperature really matters when you're applying coatings and sealants. You don't want to create a flash cure. Surface or air temperatures really do matter when it comes to the winter time, especially if you're using a water-based anything, a water-based caulking or chinking, water-based coatings. They do need to have a warmer temperature to cure in. So surface temperature is key, but air temperatures matter, especially overnight when you're applying sealants. Use an infrared thermometer. They're really great. They come in handy when you're grilling, when you want to check the temperature of your meat as well. Did I get a good sear on it? So infrared thermometers, they have multiple uses and they're, $20, maybe 25 for you up in Canada on Amazon. Very easy to get a hold of. So we've gone through those prerequisites. Oh, here's a nice picture. This is a very fancy infrared thermometer. This is not what I have for grilling at home. This is probably a $90 model. I stick with the $20 one myself. Um, and because we know logs get hot, it affects everything else applied to logs. And so I'm going to go through some stain application and technology basics with you guys. Even if you're not doing the work, this is certainly information that you can pass on to the people who might be subcontracting for you to do the work, homeowners who are looking to have somebody do the work for them. You want to make sure this is the information that they know. So I'm going to jump in. Here are just some very basic exterior stain application best practices. This seems basic, but we see it all the time. Mask off anything that you don't want stained. That includes the deck. If you have specialty decking, I've seen some really good mahogany decking ruined by overspray. Or if you have any Trex or anything like that, mask off anything that you don't want stained. Do not stain on a windy day. Stain is so very lightweight. It's not like paint. It can get picked up by the wind and get carried to nearby vehicles, or plants and that kind of thing. So try to avoid a breeze is nice. A breeze will keep you cool. Wind is no good. Always intermix stain from different lot numbers. They're just like anything else. There's going to be lot to lot differences in the color. So if it's a different lot number, you need to be intermixing. Plan your work to avoid surfaces being too hot or cold. Work in the shade. Flood spray that first coat, making sure to pay special attention to filling checks and cracks, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Back brush vigorously, get your back into it. This is not a brushing out any runs, light brushing. This is a very vigorous, I am forcing this into the wood back brushing. The second coat is going to be kind of a lighter regular kind of back brushing to catch drips. It's going to be a lighter coat. You're really using that second coat to, if you're using a film building stain, build the right thickness of that film and even out color and sheen. Work 2 to 3 boards at a time all the way across to a natural break. Otherwise, you'll end up with some really gnarly and ugly, dare I say, lap lines. Fill the checks and cracks for each coat. Don't just make sure they're coated, like flood them. Bare wood leads to stain failure, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And just a little tip, if you ever come across a dried drip while applying the second coat, usually a little bit of wet sanding will blend it right in. So you're just going to work that in a little bit and help everything go a little bit more smoothly. So let's talk about end grain. Um, there's a lot of wicking action that happens on end grain. Wood cells are kind of like a bundle of straws. So if I were to hold up a whole bundle of straws and you see all the holes through the straws right there, that's exactly what wood cells are like. And those ends, when they get cut off, they are, designed by nature to create capillary action that draws moisture up the tree. We all think that, gravity is the name of the game. Well, capillary action forces moisture up the tree. And when you cut that tree down and cut off the end, that moisture, that capillary action still wants to happen. Um, so soak those log ends. If you don't want to be too dark, use a couple of coats of the pre-stain base coat like Color Fast and then the stain, but soak them with as much stain as they will take so that you are preventing that capillary action from happening, and which can eventually lead to rot if you're not careful. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't mention um, exposed log ends are a really bad idea. The wider the overhangs, the better. You really want to be protecting those logs from moisture and sun as much as possible. So we are big fans of, 4 foot overhangs as a minimum. And if you can't do that, you're going to have more maintenance. So just be aware of that. So we're going to talk about back brushing. Why is back brushing important? Well, good stain penetration is achieved when the stain flows through these bordered pit pairs here. And so your brush is what's taking those. Now your stain, the molecules of the stain are generally too large to want to naturally flow into there when you're using a film forming kind of stain. And we're going to go into stain types and their pros and cons. A deep penetrating oil is going to have no problem flowing in here at all. But with anything that's a surface film forming stain, you got to force it into these bordered pit pairs to give your stain kind of mechanical adhesion like Velcro. So what happens, you push the stain, you open up this little flapper valve on here, push the stain in here, and then that flapper valve close again, and now you have stain inside of that bordered pit pair, really anchoring that stain into the wood cells. Really creates much better durability of the stain when you do that vigorous back brushing. So a little light brush, like you would if you were just brushing out runs, is not going to do the trick. You really do have to get your back into it. We always recommend like the 4 or 5 foot long uh stain the poles that have the 5 or 6 inch deck staining brushes on the end of them, and you just push and get it in there. It's when you're staining, best to have 2 people at least doing the work, one of them spraying and another person coming right behind and brushing everything in very vigorously. Uh, this is probably one of my favorite quotes. Not back brushing is like applying tape without pushing it down. It's a very good word picture. You wouldn't just let the tape float in the air and see where it lands. You're going to put it on the surface and push it down. That is exactly what back brushing is doing for you. And here's why back brushing is important and how we show you how stains fail. This is the same board through 4 years of weathering all the way across. You start to see, here's the nice even coat. You'll start to get little tiny pinholes in there. In the second year, there's more tiny pinholes letting moisture in. By the end of the 4th year, you've got a coating that has completely failed. In part because you haven't back brushed, in part because you haven't done maintenance. So maintenance is important to help fill in these little pinholes and create that even coating and prevent some of this ugliness from happening. But it also matters how good your stain moves, meaning how elastic it is. Uh, there are a lot of stains out there that have absolutely no elasticity or flexibility to them at all. And as we talked about earlier, logs are always moving. So you got to have products that can move with it. If you're using a very rigid stain that can't move with the wood, these pinholes are going to happen much more frequently and much more quickly. And I'll show you guys some of our exposure panel testing, but we've done some exposure panels here in our backyard where we've seen stains fail within about 4 months because they can't handle the freeze thaw of cycles of our weather here in Colorado. And so having that elasticity is really important. When you keep moisture out in the first place, you don't have to worry about moisture being a problem. But the goal is to keep it out in the first place. So, speaking of stain types and how they perform, they're really more than just oil and water-based, believe it or not. There are deep penetrating oil stains, shallow penetrating oil stains, and hybrid stains. And then there are surface stains. Those are all water-based acrylics. I'm going to go into each type of these, their pros and cons. They each have their place in the world. We are advocates ourselves of any sort of film forming stain, which are always going to be the shallow penetrating ones and the surface stains on log walls. Deep penetrating oil-based stains don't tend to last long enough. And they are not compatible with sealants, meaning the chinking and the caulking that are applied. And that can cause some issues if there's a crack or a check or point that opens up and you need to seal it and you can't because those oils are on the surface. So, but let's go through these different types and kind of what their pros and cons are. So first one we'll start with is those deep penetrating non-drying oils. Think motor oil. Think a lot of them these days are paraffin waxes. Sometimes they're mixed with a drying oil, a linseed oil, or something like that. They penetrate thousands of cells deep and never stop moving. So they'll go in 3/4 of an inch, even more. I've seen cross sections of logs that were 12-inch logs where that stain was about 4 inches deep in there. They penetrate in very deep. They claim to restore dried out wood, which I suppose is true. It's like throwing some uh, motor oil, vegetable oil on something, it's going to moisturize it. But again, the problem with these is that sealants aren't compatible and they leave the surface completely without any protection. And so I like to think of deep penetrating non-drying oil stains kind of like putting on an SPF 8 and calling it good. It's going to last you for a little while, give you, a little bit of protection, but as soon as those really dive in deep, that surface is unprotected and UV damage is the gateway drug, if you will, of any other damage, of moisture getting in, of insects getting in. The sun comes up and it starts to really chew away at the wood fiber and the lignin, and now moisture can get in. And it doesn't matter if you have oils down in there 3 inches deep, that surface can still get rot started because it is unprotected. Um, there are some advantages to deep penetrating non-drying oils. There are no lap marks. They're very easy to apply, very easy to maintain. They're great on shingles, fences, sometimes on decks and handrails, depending on how much stays on the surface. There's not actually much of a need to backbrush, as I talked about, because oils are creepy. They're always liquid. They always move. We have some little containers of deep penetrating oils that we pass around in our contractor training seminars that we've had in those containers for 15 years now, and they're still liquid. Those oils never dry. They never get to a solid state. They're going to stay in that wood forever. The weaknesses are sealants and chinking won't stick to them. They can destroy the adhesion of existing sealants and chinking. They have very poor durability, again, because nothing is left on the surface. Usually requires yearly or every 2-year reapplication. Depending on how much wax is in there, there's a lot of dirt pickup that can happen with them. And Especially early on. Color transfer can happen. You do not want to rub up against the wall of a log home that's been stained a week ago with a deep penetrating oil because it's going to get on your clothes. So you have to be very careful about that. So the next one, the shallow penetrating drying oil stains, these are also considered hybrid stains. The water and oil emulsions, so they have some alkyd resins in them, but they are in a water base. This is the traditional type of stain that's been around for years and years. Oils dry as they react to oxygen and crosslink. They go about 5 cells deep on a good day. They are going to form a very thin, maybe 1 to 2 mil thickness film to give you that UV protection. So they're a good choice, especially on a home that has previously had a deep penetrating oil on it. These are your safest bet. You won't have to worry about potentials for incompatibilities if you were to switch to a water, to say if you were going to switch to a water base. The strengths of these, they have pretty good penetration. You can recoat with no problems. They're compatible with most sealants. The oil-based versions can go over most existing stains. They are the most beautiful of the stains that you can get. And they're generally easy to apply. That first coat will require some back brushing, but not anywhere near as much as a water-based would. The water-based versions are easy water cleanup. They dry very quickly. They're considered greener because they are lower VOC as compared to most oil-based stains that are solvent-based, have a lot of mineral spirits or PCBTF. PCBTF is a chemical that is starting to be outlawed in a lot of areas. So those water-based versions are sometimes a good alternative to that. Their weaknesses, all drying oils will get brittle with age and then crack, which then means that they'll peel and erode. And so that means that if you aren't keeping up on routine maintenance, you're going to have to go back to bare wood sooner rather than later. Based on what we've seen so far, the longest you'll get with routine maintenance out of a drying oil-based and a true solvent-based stain is about 17 years. And that's with doing recoats every 3 to 5, depending on the exposure and the side of the home and that kind of thing. Whereas with a water-based acrylic, our water-based acrylic in particular, we have homes out there that have been going on for 25 years now without having to go to bare wood. But these shallow penetrating drying oils are generally going to be your only option, like I said, when there has been a previous non-drying oil on there. The other challenges with these is that urethane products, they do not breathe very well. So those can be used interior, but we don't recommend them exterior, besides the fact that urethanes are usually much more rigid. You have that solvent or oil odor. There's some VOC restrictions. They're getting more expensive, and lap marks can be a challenge depending on how quickly they dry. So finally, surface stains. These are all water-based products. So you're not going to find a solvent-based in a surface stain. It doesn't exist. These are really adapted from acrylic paint technology. We have all seen tons of homes with paint on them, and paint actually does perform pretty well, but not all of them are created equal, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They rely on mechanical attachment to the wood, and their ability to move is really important for success. The only way that they penetrate that 1 cell deep is with you forcing them into the wood cell with that back brushing. But their strengths, they're very durable to UV and water. Depending on the brand, they can be very flexible and elastic. So they're not going to crack and peel as readily as a drying oil would. Easy cleanup, water-based. There's no smell to them. They are obviously very VOC, and environmentally friendly. Again, these are all based on paint technology. So they're going to be the best, but it does matter. We've all seen those, like quick dry painter's caulks, the cheapest paint that you can get at, Home Hardware or Lowe's. Those are not going to have the same elasticity. So formulation quality really does matter with these. The weaknesses, wood prep is much more important. So getting down to sound wood, again, because this is relying on mechanical adhesion to the wood fiber, getting all that unsound wood off is much more important. And oil base is going to be much more forgiving with prep that is, maybe not as sufficient as it needs to be. They will eventually crack and peel through fatigue. Those that are cheaper and harder are going to do that sooner. They dry very quickly. Lap marks, especially on a windy, breezy day, can be a challenge. So you really got to watch that and make sure that you are working those 2 to 3 boards across. And then some manufacturers will include silicones, waxes, and other non-drying oils, especially deck stains, which again can interfere with the adhesion of sealants. So you got to look out for those. Um, I can tell you with certainty that nobody, Sanson, Sashco, Permachink, Timber Pro, none of those companies are including those silicones and waxes in their formulas. It's mostly going to be the big guys, the PPGs, the Bears, the Benjamin Moores that will sometimes include that to improve early water beading. Um, and it's always a hit or miss kind of thing. So just something to look out for. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, the promise of a one coat product. You guys probably all heard of the paint and primer in one kind of products, which is just really not something that is good. We did a side by side of our capture, which is a water-based stain. You really do have to have the right film build on those. Those film build products are like, an SPF 30 with long sleeves on. If you skip and don't put on enough of that SPF 30, this is what will happen this is about 2 years of exposure, uh, facing south here in Denver again. So you get a nice uh, bake going on that upper curve where the stain, again, all those micro cracks, the moisture gets in, it heats up, it creates osmotic pressure that then wants to push out of the logs and causes the stain to lose adhesion. And it looks like bare wood. Sometimes it looks like flaking or peeling wood. Really, it's that moisture coming out and it's just too much pressure. 2 coats makes a big difference because you're getting that right film build on there. With our capture and cascade system, we recommend that there be a 3 to 4 mil wet thickness. We say wet, but you're not supposed to be doing wet on wet coats. It's supposed to be wet on dry coats for those. Uh, but you can see how big a difference 2 coats make. So if someone tells you they have a 1 coat product, understand what they're expecting for a mil thickness and make sure you're putting it on there heavily enough. Most contractors that we know with some of the 1 coat products, they're really doing kind of a 1.5 coat, which really with labor means you're doing 2 coats. Let's be honest. So Sashco actually puts our stains to the test against a variety of different competitors. We started this primarily to help improve our own products. We wanted to see who out there had a really great formula so that we could start improving our stain. And it has helped immensely over the years for us to identify ways that we need to improve our products. We take these panels, we cut them down the middle, we seal them with some caulking so there isn't any wicking and capillary action happening between the 2 sides. We apply the stains according to directions, but usually we're a little bit more generous in putting a little bit more on there because we want to be fair to everybody when we want to give every single stain the best chance of performing. Uh, and then we stick them out on these exposure racks facing due south at a 45-degree angle, and they sit out there for 18 months, just baking, taking all of the weather. This top half, you can see the metal there. That part of the wood, you can see it in the picture here, is totally covered up by the metal, and then everything else is exposed. That's how we see how our products perform, our coatings in particular. Uh, and like I said, it gives us a good idea of what to expect out of our coatings and what we need to improve. You can find those full reports on our website. So if you just go to sashco.com and go to the specific stains, capture, or transformation log and timber, you can see the performance reports there for yourself. We have a new round underway that we put on the fence this summer. So we're, 3-4 months into that now and starting to see some early results, and watch our social media for that because we'll be sharing some of that on our social media. So that was a whirlwind. If you guys, I need to go into the chat. I'm not seeing if there are any questions. I don't see any questions in there right now. But if you have questions that come up, reach out to us. Please take a shot of this QR code. If you're on your phone right now, you can get it from I'll have Barb email it out to you all, the link to it as well. You can call us, this 800 number. You can ask for me. I'm Carice. You can ask for Todd. You can ask for the girl who did the ILBA webinar. They'll know who you are. We're not a huge company. They're going to know who did that. They'll send you to me. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, Sashco Log Homes. We post a lot of tips on there and just, fun pictures from pros who are doing this work. We want to have a good conversation with you, and especially if you have any good jokes to share. I always like hearing that because in general, I only hear bad jokes, dad jokes. So I always welcome a good joke that really makes me laugh that I then want to repeat to other people. So thank you for joining us. Barb,
There's
you got
somebody,
anything else?
there is a question in the chat
Oh,
now.
there is a question. I
Yeah,
missed it.
it just came up.
You're building in Silver City, New Mexico. Hey, just south of us, 6,500 feet. Um, yes, you definitely have some work to look forward to, Eric.
It's fun work.
It's fun work.
Love it.
I always tell people, the work up front is the hardest piece. It's probably going to be the most frustrating, because it feels like it's going to take forever. But boy, the satisfaction of doing it right the first time and the durability you're going to get out of that is going to be so worth it. The number of people who call us up who cut corners, that we then have to coach through how to fix it. It's a lot harder to fix it when you've cut corners the first time, and going to cost you a lot more. All of the money and the time is in the prep. And so if you skimp on that prep up front, you're going to pay for it down the road. I didn't put that slide in here, but we have this graphic where we tell people, keep it in the easy zone. If you keep doing routine maintenance every, like I said, 3 to 5 years or so, 3 years on the south and west walls, you can go 5, sometimes even 7 on the north and the east walls that don't get as much weather. Uh, you keep up on that routine maintenance, it'll go a good long time when you're doing proper prep. But without proper prep, it doesn't matter which side of the home it is, it's going to fail. So you want to do that proper prep. The other thing I would tell you, Eric, is with your build, if design isn't, if you have not designed really good overhangs into your home, try to do that now. Those overhangs make such a huge difference on the durability of everything on the home, the wood itself, anything applied to it, how weather tight your home is. Really good overhangs make a very big difference. And it is the thing that is lacking the most, on log homes that we see. So yeah, Eric also says anyone can paint. The knowledge is in the prep, and that is the truth. And I'm telling you, painters who go into the log home business and really learn what they're doing. If any of you are interested in getting into log home finishing, there's a big need for log home finishers throughout North America, US and Canada, people who know how to do it right, and they can charge a premium for it, not only because there are fewer people in the market, but because it is a specialty job. It requires a lot more expertise. And so if you're interested in that, let us know. We have a training seminar called Zero Failures for Contractors. We have a section, a 2-day section on proper prep and application of the products. You get to practice on your own log wall. It's not taught just by us. We teach the classroom kind of science sections, but we have contractors who are actively working on log homes who teach the hands-on section. And then we also have a business focus class that goes for 2 days that goes into the how to make sure you're charging the right thing, how to attract and keep employees. So I'd love to talk to you guys about zero failures as well. We have classes coming up in January, February, and March here at our home office in Colorado. So we'd love to
Sold out
talk to you about
January.
that. Sold out January, you're right. January's not available. February is half sold out. Those classes, they sell out very quickly. We had a waiting list last year by like late January. So if you want to sign up, you need to sign up now. It would be wise to sign up now. And we'd love to have you. So any other questions? Yeah, 28-inch overhang, not generally sufficient. 48-inch is going to be much better. Much better. You want to limit exposure on the wall to moisture, insects, sun. You want to limit that as much as possible. And so the wider the better. Wider the better. And Eric, feel free to reach out. I'm gonna just here's my direct line. I'm putting it in the chat here. You can call or text here. If for some reason I'm not available, I will, or out of town or something, I can always forward that on to Todd.
Here, you want to just put mine in there?
Oh yeah, what's Todd?
Mine's 720-322-8280.
I should have put that in the PowerPoint. I'll change that, Barb, and send that to you. This is Todd. Call or text us there. We are happy to talk you through
We'd love to chat with you.
all of that stuff. We do this all day, every day for an hour or two, sometimes with homeowners. And we're happy to do it. We'd rather you get it done right. So happy to talk. All right. Anything else? Wonderful. Oh, hi, Nadia. I see Nadia's on. I missed you earlier.
Nadia just came on the last
Oh, okay.
15
She just
minutes.
came.
She had, yeah, she was the first one to sign up. Do you want me to unmute everyone?
If you guys want to unmute, I'll say hi to everybody. Hi
Yeah.
and bye because we're done, but we recorded it. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I was just
Really
wondering to see
appreciate
if I
it.
could unmute everybody. Asked to unmute. I did it manually. I don't usually mute people, so that's a new thing for me to do.
That's all right. No big deal. You guys have my information. So thanks, Bruce. Glad you made it.
Oops, there's something else in there too. Yes. Everybody thanking you. Thank you, Carice. That was very informative. I love these things. I learn more each time. So
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I learn something new every day, and I've been here 20 years. So that's kind of the way it goes, right? It's a good way to be always constantly learning. So,
yeah.
all right. Thanks,
All right.
all.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a good night.
Yeah. All right. Stop the recording.